Ryan and Heather's story began in their hometown of Illinois when both were still very young, working side by side as employees at Walmart, one of the largest retail chains in the US. Their connection quickly turned into love. And that love led them to take a bold step for their age, leaving everything behind to build a new life together somewhere better. Ryan and Heather traveled over 1,000 kilometers to settle in the state of Georgia. Neither had completed high school, so the move came with challenges. Continuing their studies, maintaining their relationship, and finding a way to support themselves financially. The pressure soon became overwhelming for the young couple, piling stress on top of their already fragile situation. For about 5 years, Ryan and Heather tried their best to make things work. But cracks began to show in their relationship. Eventually, they decided to return to Illinois. And shortly after, Heather discovered she was expecting a baby. Although Ryan had always dreamed of becoming a father, the news carried mixed emotions. He loved Heather deeply, but he couldn't ignore the uncertainty surrounding their future together. As time passed, Ryan leaned on his family for support. During her pregnancy, Heather grew distant, relying more on her mother than on Ryan. Whenever he offered help, Heather would simply say her mother was handling everything. When the due date came, Ryan struggled to be present for the birth. It was Heather's brother, not Ryan, who held the newborn first, a moment that left Ryan feeling heartbroken. The woman he loved had just given birth to their daughter, yet he already felt shut out of this life-changing moment. To make matters more painful, Heather named the baby Keela on Behan, a decision that somehow deepened Ryan's sense of being left aside. He wanted nothing more than to be a devoted father. But Heather stayed in her family's home and only allowed Ryan to visit occasionally. It was 2 long weeks before he could finally hold his daughter for the first time, a time filled with worry and longing to be close to her. But Ryan's struggle had only just begun. During one visit, Heather told him they should separate. As he held baby Keela, Ryan broke down in quiet tears, apologizing to his daughter, feeling powerless to give her the family life she deserved. Despite everything, Ryan refused to give up on being a father. However, Heather continued to decline his offers of help and rarely let him care for Keela. He wasn't allowed to change her, feed her, or witness her early milestones, moments every parent longs for. One memory that stuck with him was the single time Heather let him feed Keela porridge. That small moment of connection became one of Ryan's most cherished memories. At first, Ryan only had 1 hour a week to spend with his daughter. Over time, that increased slightly to 2 or 3 hours, though the tension between him and Heather only grew. She began demanding larger sums of money from him, adding more strain to an already complicated situation. Still, Ryan sought out spaces where he could share time with his daughter away from conflict, often taking her to parks or libraries. Then came a moment that felt almost magical to him. Keela had just learned to talk, and one day she said her doll's hair was messy and needed a haircut. Ryan was filled with pure joy and wonder, knowing that simple, sweet moment would stay with him forever. Around this time, Ryan met a woman named Lisa, someone who shared his devotion to parenthood. Lisa also had children, one of whom was around the same age as Keela. The woman Ryan had met, Lisa, was going through a divorce at the time, so in the beginning, their connection was light-hearted. They enjoyed each other's company, spending hours talking about all kinds of topics. Because Ryan valued his daughter above all else, he soon confided in Lisa about his situation with Heather and his struggle to be part of Keela's life. He wanted to know how he could legally assert his rights as a father. He never intended to take full custody from Heather. His only goal was to ensure that Keela had both parents actively involved in her life. Lisa, having gone through a separation herself, shared her own experiences. Her advice prompted Ryan to look deeper into his rights, and he discovered that Heather had indeed been restricting them unfairly. As time passed, Ryan and Lisa's bond grew stronger, and they eventually made their relationship official, moving in together. By then, Keela was 3 years old. Ryan felt it was the right moment to invite his daughter to spend an afternoon with him, Lisa, and Lisa's children at their home. The plan worked out perfectly. Keela had a wonderful time. She was affectionate with her father, enjoying the warmth of being surrounded by family. Seeing this filled Ryan with hope. For the first time in a long while, he could picture a happy future where Keela was a regular part of his daily life, spending time with him, his fiancée, and her step-siblings. With this new sense of stability, Ryan decided to take a big step forward. He proposed to Lisa. The news brought joy to their loved ones, who shared their happiness on social media, but just a week later that joy was overshadowed. Heather appeared at Ryan's workplace with her mother and delivered unexpected news. She planned to move with Keela to Athens, Georgia. Heather had always been a free-spirited person with an interest in photography and art, so Ryan assumed this move was part of her personal journey. Still, her announcement came without warning or real explanation. The argument she gave, that it was now her turn to find happiness, felt hollow to Ryan. He didn't object to Heather pursuing her own dreams, but the thought of being separated from Keela again was devastating. Heather and her mother claimed they had everything worked out. Their plan was that Heather's mother would travel every 15 days from Athens to Illinois, bringing Keela to visit Ryan on weekends. To Ryan, this arrangement was completely unrealistic. Even worse, Heather's mother made it clear that if Ryan didn't agree to their terms, they could simply cut him off from Keela altogether. In the following days, Ryan tried to negotiate, hoping to reach a fair compromise for visits and child support. Heather seemed to agree at first, but it turned out she was only buying time. Shortly after, she moved without telling him. Ryan only found out because, during a phone call, his little daughter innocently mentioned their new home. The next day, Ryan filed a petition to establish formal visitation rights and child support arrangements, sparking a legal battle that would drag on for years. It was now 2012. When Heather learned Ryan wanted to be more present in Keela's life, she reacted as if it were a challenge, turning the situation into a conflict. In court, she insisted that Ryan should only see Keela in Illinois during school breaks, or not at all unless he relocated to Georgia. The judge ruled on child support that day, but left visitation arrangements unsettled. For the time being, Ryan had to settle for virtual contact, seeing Keela on Skype twice a week. When Heather travelled to Illinois for holidays, he was allowed short visits. During those moments, he was relieved to see his daughter growing into a sweet, affectionate little girl with a love for animals and nature. But every time he returned to court, Heather found new reasons to limit or deny his visits. Eventually, she even claimed that Ryan's family, and sometimes Ryan himself, weren't safe caregivers for Keela. The courts took a cautious approach, delaying any firm decision on a structured visitation schedule. Ryan's hope of being a consistent part of his daughter's life was left hanging in uncertainty. Court-appointed specialists were assigned to evaluate Ryan's family home and interactions with Keela. Their findings were very different from what Heather had claimed in court. Slowly, over time, Ryan began to have more opportunities to spend time with his daughter. At times, it seemed their bond was growing stronger, showing real signs of improvement. Other times, however, Keela appeared more distant, and Ryan couldn't understand why. The lack of consistent contact was clearly affecting their relationship. Communication with Heather remained difficult, to the point where they had to agree to use a specialized app to organize visitation and keep all exchanges documented. Meanwhile, the legal process continued. Ryan was determined to secure not just his own rights, but Keela's right to grow up with both parents present in her life. Eventually, the court found clear evidence that Heather had repeatedly tried to distance Keela from her father and his new family, even going so far as to ignore judicial orders on multiple occasions. Then, in early 2017, the court made a surprising decision that changed everything. Heather was ordered to return to Illinois with Keela, and full custody was granted to Ryan. Heather was given the right to supervised visits. From that moment on, Ryan dedicated himself fully to being the best father he could be. They read books together, made up little plays with stuffed animals, and spent hours drawing and creating art. Even simple moments like brushing her hair or watching TV side by side became precious memories. Life at home improved significantly. Keela, now 9 years old, blossomed into a strong, intelligent and confident girl who wasn't afraid to share her opinions. She helped out around the house and often acted as the peacemaker during minor squabbles with her stepbrother. But Heather struggled to accept the court's decision. Reports suggest that she began plotting to change the situation in her favour, allegedly with support from her family, especially her brother Justin, with whom she maintained a close relationship. By mid-2017, custody disputes had mostly settled down, and there hadn't been new legal conflicts for some time. So, when Heather asked Ryan if Keeler could spend the night at her house for the 4th of July holiday, Ryan agreed, trusting that their co-parenting situation had improved. On July 3rd, the evening before the visit, Ryan told Keeler how much he loved her and wished her a fun time with her mother. The next day, as Americans across the country celebrated Independence Day with fireworks, barbecues and family gatherings, Keeler arrived at Heather's home in South Elgin, Illinois, a small town with a population of just over 20,000 people. Ryan planned to pick her up the following day. But on July 5th, after finishing work, Ryan drove to Heather's house and was met with a terrifying reality. Both Heather and Keeler were gone. Heather had packed a couple of suitcases and fled with their daughter. Ryan immediately went looking for them. When he contacted Heather's relatives, they coldly told him the two had gone camping in Wisconsin, then shut the door in his face. Something was very wrong. Ryan wasted no time. He called the police and reported his daughter missing. Days turned into weeks without any word from Heather or Keeler. On July 28, 2017, nearly a month later, a warrant was issued for Heather's arrest on charges related to parental kidnapping. A non-profit organisation that supports families of missing children joined the search, hoping to bring Keeler home safely. Authorities initially tracked Heather's vehicle, believing it might lead to her whereabouts. But shortly after, they discovered she had sold the car in Georgia, forcing the investigation to shift focus there. Despite this lead, every search ended in frustration, as if Heather and Keeler had vanished without a trace. Then in 2018, another shocking development occurred. Heather's brother Justin also disappeared. Acting on a search warrant, police went through the family's Illinois home and found internet searches about how to disappear and how to contact organizations that could help hide someone's identity. Despite these clues, investigators reached another dead end. Even with occasional reported sightings of Heather and Keeler in Georgia, none of the information was solid enough to move the case forward. Over the years, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, kept Keeler's case active, sharing her photo and information across multiple platforms, hoping someone would recognize her and provide a credible lead. A dedicated Facebook page called Bring Keeler Home was created to raise awareness about the case. It shared updates, appeals for information, and age progression photos showing how Keeler might look as the years passed. Ryan also launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for search efforts and to support initiatives that could help secure his daughter's safe return. Throughout what he described as the darkest chapter of his life, Ryan refused to stay silent. He made every effort to keep Keeler's name and story alive, determined that the world would not forget his little girl. In the process, Ryan began researching the issue of child abductions, especially those involving parental disputes. He learned from numerous studies that both child abduction and deliberate alienation from a parent are considered forms of abuse. He wanted the public to understand that, while many assumed Kayla was safe simply because she was with her mother, being cut off from her father was still deeply harmful to her well-being. That understanding became an important part of his fight. Meanwhile, the arrest warrant for Heather remained active for years, and she was officially listed as a fugitive from justice. On November 1st, 2022, Part 3 of Netflix's rebooted documentary series Unsolved Mysteries aired. Among the many strange disappearances featured was the case of Keeler. Though her image appeared on screen for only a few seconds toward the end of an episode, it was long enough to make a lasting impression on one viewer. On Saturday, May 13th, 2023, the manager of a clothing store called Clothes Closet in the Westgate Regional Shopping Center in Asheville, South Carolina, believed they recognized Keeler, not just from a photo on a TV screen, but in person. By then, the girl had changed over the years, yet the manager immediately connected her appearance to the widely shared age progression images. Authorities were contacted right away. Around 7:26 p.m, Asheville police officers arrived on the scene and confirmed the situation. Heather, now 40 years old, was arrested on the spot. She was later released on a $250,000 bond, according to the online judicial records of North Carolina. Her first court appearance was scheduled for July 11, 2023, before the Buncombe County District Court, where a decision would be made regarding her extradition to Illinois, where the original charges were filed. Lieutenant Jonathan Brown, of the local police, expressed his astonishment at Heather's ability to stay off the grid for so many years. In today's world, most people leave behind a digital footprint that makes it nearly impossible to disappear completely. Yet somehow, Heather had managed to avoid detection for over half a decade. That same weekend, Keela was reunited with her father. Ryan brought his daughter back home to Illinois, ending a painful chapter that had lasted far too long. Shortly after, Ryan released a heartfelt public statement expressing the indescribable happiness and relief he felt having his daughter safely back in his arms. He thanked local police, law enforcement agencies nationwide, concerned citizens, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for their relentless efforts and support. Above all, he requested privacy for himself and Keela as they navigated their long-awaited new beginning together. News of Keela's safe recovery spread rapidly across global media outlets and went viral on social platforms. Netflix also shared the joyful update on its official Twitter account, highlighting how crucial media exposure can be in helping to recover missing children. Even in long-term cases like Keela's, the more stories and images circulate, the greater the chance that someone will recognize them, said Callahan Walsh from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The case also reignited an online debate. Should parents face criminal charges for abducting their own children? While some sympathized with Heather's actions, experts and statistics painted a clearer picture. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reports that cases of child abduction by strangers are extremely rare, representing only about 1% of all cases. In reality, the vast majority of child abductions in the US are committed by family members, and within this group, parents are the most frequent perpetrators. Family-related abductions like Keela's are far more common than many people realize, making this a very real and disturbingly frequent problem in child welfare cases. Ryan later shared his concerns about the long-term impact this ordeal might have on his daughter. He worried that being cut off from part of her family could leave emotional scars. The hopeful news is that the vast majority of children abducted by family members are eventually recovered alive. Advances in technology and dedicated investigative work have made reunions possible, and while it took 6 long years, thankfully Keela was one of them. We reached the end of today's case. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, always remembering to keep the discussion respectful toward the victim and her family. On the morning of August 9th, 2010, a group of hikers were walking along the disused Rugby railway line in Warwickshire, England, when they made a grim discovery. Lying across the old tracks was the body of a woman, estimated to be around 25 years old. Her head was covered with a plastic bag, and her remains were found in a state that suggested she had been left exposed to the elements. The hikers quickly contacted authorities. When police and forensic teams arrived, they noted that the scene was disordered, containing multiple sets of footprints and signs of disturbance. Their initial findings suggested more than one person had been involved, and that those responsible had acted with extreme disregard for life. The victim was identified as 27-year-old Gemma Hayter. According to her family, she was a woman with special needs, living with a form of autism. She had been living independently since the age of 24, but her cognitive challenges meant she needed regular assistance with daily activities. Her mother, devastated by the loss, explained that she had sought help from social services many times. Unfortunately, bureaucracy and procedural delays meant Gemma had been left isolated, without the specialized educational and personal support she needed. When investigators visited her home, they found it in a state of disarray, confirming her mother's account. Despite her challenges, neighbors and friends described Gemma as friendly, warm, and generous. However, her trusting and naive nature made her vulnerable to people who might take advantage of her. One friend, Frank, provided a crucial account. On August 7th, just 2 days before her body was found, he had seen Gemma with 2 young men, 20-year-old Daniel Newstead and 22-year-old Santel Bott. Both were known locally for illegal activities, but Gemma considered them friends simply because they had included her in their group. Frank explained that Gemma had told him she was accompanying them to Coventry because they needed her help. In reality, they were using her as a cover to conceal stolen goods in her bag. Frank had warned her repeatedly that these individuals were not true friends, but Gemma's trusting nature made it difficult for her to believe they meant her harm. Police inquiries revealed that Newstead and Bott were part of a group of 5, including 18-year-old Joe Boyer, Jessica Linus and Duncan Edwards. All came from areas struggling with high crime and unemployment rates. Thanks to Frank's information, investigators searched Gemma's home and discovered several stolen items along with illegal substances. At that moment, detectives realized that the group had been using Gemma for their own gain. Gemma had not only been used as cover for shoplifting, her home had also been exploited as a base for the handling and distribution of illegal substances. During further inquiries in Coventry, detectives located a place that yielded crucial leads. According to a security guard's statement, Gemma had once arrived there accompanied by the 5 members of the group. As they entered, one of the young women, later identified as Chantel, made a comment suggesting she was younger than her actual age. When Gemma repeated it in a joking tone, Chantel reacted aggressively, pushing her and striking her in the face. The guard remembered the incident clearly, noting that the reaction seemed disproportionate and intentionally unkind, as though the aggressor found satisfaction in belittling her. The guard had the impression this was not the first time such treatment had occurred. With all 5 suspects now linked through witness accounts, the investigation began to close in. Forensic specialists had identified at least 5 distinct shoe print patterns at the scene, one of which appeared clearly on the victim's clothing. The key was to match any of the suspects to one of those prints. Then a development came from an unexpected source. Jessica, one of the accused, posted an unusual message on social media about Gemma's death. While the tone appeared to be one of shock and fear, investigators noticed signs of nervousness. They brought her in for questioning. At first, Jessica was evasive, but confronted with evidence, she eventually broke down and admitted to being present when Gemma was assaulted at Chantel's home on August 7th. Her account was enough for police to arrest the rest of the group, charging them with unlawful detention, mistreatment and murder. The case sent shockwaves through the UK, drawing parallels in public discussion to the earlier killing of Jennifer Doherty, another woman with special needs who had been murdered in Pennsylvania, USA, earlier that same year. When the trial began, the details presented were profoundly disturbing. The prosecution laid out a timeline of roughly 48 hours in which Gemma, a vulnerable woman who had trusted these individuals, suffered repeated abuse. According to evidence, on the afternoon of August 7th, after the initial assault over the joke, the group took Gemma to Chantel's house, where they subjected her to repeated humiliation and physical harm. Witness accounts and forensic findings suggested she had been shoved into a metal radiator, causing visible injuries, struck multiple times with a mop, confined in a small bathroom, and forced to endure degrading treatment. This continued for many hours into the early morning of August 8th. The following day, they told her they would take her home. CCTV footage shown in court captured the group walking with her, ensuring she was covered in a large hooded sweatshirt, apparently to conceal her visible injuries from passers-by. She appeared to walk with difficulty, but instead of taking her home, they diverted to the disused Rugby railway line. There, the abuse resumed. Testimony and forensic evidence revealed that a plastic bag was placed over her head, causing her to cry out in fear, which prompted mocking from the group. She was then subjected to further physical violence. At one point, one of the men used a knife to inflict a fatal wound, after which her clothing was removed in an apparent attempt to destroy evidence by setting it alight, though the attempt failed. When the acts were over, the group left the scene. The courtroom was silent as the prosecutor described the sequence of events. The judge, jury and public appeared stunned. The prosecution categorized the case as a hate-motivated killing of a vulnerable individual, and the judge concurred in that assessment. During the proceedings, the defense sought to reframe the narrative surrounding Gemma. They attempted to depict her not as a victim, but as an active member of the group, suggesting the incident was a confrontation between equals, a dispute among individuals involved in unlawful activities, in which self-defense had played a role. This approach aimed to remove the hate crime classification and reduce it to a lesser charge, which could have significantly lowered potential sentences. The defense lawyer argued that Gemma's association with the group was voluntary, noting that she had not distanced herself from them or reported any mistreatment, and instead continued to defend them, treating them as friends. For a brief moment, the argument caused unease in the courtroom. However, the prosecution quickly dismantled this strategy with the testimony of Katie Marketing, an independent analyst specializing in vulnerable populations. Katie explained that a lesser-known form of hate crime can involve the ongoing abuse of those considered friends by their abusers. In Gemma's case, her autism, lack of social connections, absence of formal support, and difficulty in judging the intentions of others made her particularly vulnerable. According to Katie, isolation and the lack of institutional aid often push individuals like Gemma into environments marked by crime, poverty, and neglect. In such conditions, anyone offering companionship might be welcomed with trust and generosity, regardless of their true motives. For Gemma, the longing for human connection meant she would have endured mistreatment if it came from someone she believed cared for her. Katie described this dynamic as a tragic example of exploitation by those undeserving of such trust. The weight of the evidence, along with testimony from Katie and other experts, dismantled the defense's claims. This cleared the path for a guilty verdict. Judge Justice Rafferty then invited Gemma's mother to address the court. Visibly emotional, she spoke of the devastation of losing her daughter in such a senseless and criminal way. She expressed disbelief that 5 young adults could harm someone so vulnerable purely for their own amusement. Showing remarkable composure, she said she felt no hatred toward them, only pity, describing them as individuals who had squandered their youth and would now spend much of their lives in prison. Before sentencing, Judge Justice Rafferty described the crime as an unforgivable act committed against a good and trusting woman who had offered nothing but kindness to those who betrayed her. He stressed that the severity of the case demanded an exemplary sentence to serve as a deterrent. Chantel Davis and Joe Boyer received life sentences, with minimum terms of 20 and 22 years respectively, for charges including kidnapping, abuse and first-degree murder. While it could not be proven that Jessica Linus and Duncan Edwards had delivered the fatal act, they were convicted for their roles and sentenced to 15 and 13 years in prison. Following the verdict, Chief Inspector of Police Essex commended the swift and effective investigation that led to the capture of all 5 individuals involved. He also praised Judge Rafferty's resolve in setting a precedent that might prevent similar acts in the future. While the criminal case had concluded, public scrutiny of the failures in social and institutional protection was only beginning. In a later statement, Katie warned that Gemma's case reflected a troubling pattern, one that had repeated for years and appeared to be worsening. She highlighted critical gaps in the safety net for vulnerable individuals, beginning with the fact that Gemma's autism had never been formally diagnosed, preventing her from accessing essential support services. The analyst revealed that Gemma's family had submitted at least 23 official requests for help to various authorities, 9 of them within just 1 year, none of which received a satisfactory response. While no one could say with certainty that adequate support would have prevented her death. Timely intervention might have kept her from living in such a neglected environment and associating with people who ultimately posed a danger to her. A local council representative expressed deep regret over the systemic failures in Gemma's case and pledged that both authorities and county institutions would work to eliminate the bureaucratic barriers and procedural delays between different government bodies in order to prevent similar tragedies. Gemma's older sister, Nikki, said the family was satisfied with the sentences given to the offenders, but condemned the repeated lack of will from institutions that had denied Gemma the tools she needed to live independently and contribute positively to society. She recalled with sadness that specialists had refused to formally recognize her sister's autism and cognitive difficulties, an omission she believed had cost Gemma her life. The case had such an impact that the BBC produced a documentary, exposing the failures in the support system and the emotional and social neglect Gemma had endured. In the documentary interview, Nikki stated that her sister would likely have forgiven her killers because Gemma's nature was so gentle and compassionate that she did not harbour feelings of resentment or hatred. Through tears, Nikki reflected that on the morning of August 7th, she could have prevented Gemma from going to Coventry, that she could have taken a more active role in her life. But those opportunities were now gone. It was a warning sign that went unheeded, despite the public awareness the case eventually generated. Statistics have since shown that hate crimes targeting disabled and vulnerable individuals in the UK have risen by nearly 300% in less than a decade. Over the past 10 years, organisations such as Adult Social Care, the National Housing Department and Emergency Services have repeatedly stressed the urgency of addressing this problem. Even with greater awareness, it is possible that a crime like Gemma's might still have occurred, as those motivated by prejudice or cruelty often need only an excuse to act. Nevertheless, the need for action is clear. Without meaningful change, more families will suffer losses that could have been prevented. 1 month before her death, Gemma had written a heartfelt letter to the authorities, pleading for help. In it, she expressed her wish to find work so she could feel independent and her hope that someone would guide her through life. Because, as she wrote, that was what she needed most. Wherever she is now, we can only hope that Gemma has found genuine friendship, kindness and happiness, the kind of companionship she always deserved.